Good afternoon, everyone. And for those of you joining us from around the world, good morning and good evening. Thank you for joining us for our very first webinar of 2022. And we are kicking it off with the first webinar in our nutrition series. I am Amy Liebman. I am your host and moderator, president of NTM Info and Research. It's lovely to see you all today. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's topic is nutrition and immunity. We're pleased to welcome back Michelle MacDonald. Michelle is a clinical dietitian and certified diabetes educator at National Jewish Health in Denver, Colorado. She provides compassionate, comprehensive nutritional care to adult patients with various chronic conditions, including bronchiectasis, cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, gastrointestinal disease, interstitial lung disease, non-tuberculous mycobacterial disease, obesity, rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, and type 2 diabetes. Michelle works closely with multidisciplinary teams of specialty clinics, counseling both inpatients and outpatients. She is dedicated to helping patients use nutrition as a supportive therapy to manage disease and optimize health. Michelle completed a Bachelor of Science in Human Nutrition at Cornell University, a Master of Science in Food Science and Human Nutrition at Colorado State University, and a dietetic internship at the University of Northern Colorado. So she is the food expert. So for today, you can post your questions in the Q&A. You'll find it in that little icon down at the bottom. You type your question into the box and hit send. At the end of the presentation, I will read out the questions and Michelle will start answering them. We will try to get through all of them. If there are any that are left over, we will start having Michelle answer them by email so we can start getting answers to you, but we'll do our best to get through as many of them as possible. We have quite a lot of people registered for today's webinar. We'd like to thank INSMED for their ongoing support of our programming. Without support of companies like INSMED and without the support of people like you, we could not do the things we do. And we've been really thrilled to be able to offer this programming throughout last year and again through this year. And we hope that you'll continue to come back for more of these programs. Don't forget to follow us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can also go to our website, ntminfo.org, and sign up for our email newsletter to learn the latest news as it comes out. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Happy New Year. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, how do we look?
Looks good.
Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us today. This is actually a good topic for me. I was just telling Amy that it gives me a good chance to do some catching up on this topic because it's something I haven't actually visited in depth in a while. So I actually had fun kind of catching myself back up on some of the current information. And I'm hoping I can get through this and be helpful to you all and share some of the things that I find interesting and that I'm hoping you also find interesting. So in terms of an overview, I want to start with an overview of the immune system and 3 key features of the immune system, because I think an understanding, a basic understanding of what is happening with the immune system is helpful, because then you can see how nutrition overlaps and connects and gain an appreciation for the connection. Then we'll look at the role of nutrition and move to nutrients that support immunity, and that will be it. I honestly was also saying that I spent a lot of time looking at the nutrients, and I probably ran out of time on that section. So we'll go through, you'll see what I've highlighted, and then you'll see how I've kind of summarized everything at the end. But there are some time constraints, so I had to fit everything in. So I tried to fit in as much as possible. Okay, so let's start with the basic overview. So the immune system is a system in our body. It constantly works to protect us from infection, but also from injury and from disease. And what comes to my mind there is cancer. But when we're talking about infection, it could be anything from the common cold to COVID to any of the bugs that you might face with bronchiectasis or NTM-LD, which is lung disease, NTM lung disease. Okay, our immune system defends our body against disease-causing organisms, which I may refer to as pathogens. So these are bugs that cause disease. And there are many different bugs. Bacteria and viruses are two of the common well-known ones. So our immune system is here to keep these things out. And it's truly a complex system of organs, tissues, and cells. And I say that with the utmost humility. As I was starting to reread a lot of the material about the immune system through textbooks or other resources that I have, I was very humbled by how complicated and sophisticated it really is. Okay, so this is actually part of an infographic from the Linus Pauling Institute. But what you can see here on the left is that the immune system does consist of various organs, and then tissues and cells, which are down here more to the center right. The organs of the immune system include the thymus, which is here. It's a gland, the spleen, and lymph nodes, which you can see scattered throughout the body. And I think so this was interesting to me to reconnect again with where this is in our body. So the thymus gland is a small lymphatic organ. It lies in the upper chest here under the breastbone. It makes white blood cells, which are the cells of the immune system, specifically the T lymphocytes, which is one of the types of white blood cells. And again, it helps protect the body against infection. The spleen is here. It's another small lymphatic organ that's inside our left rib cage, just above the stomach here. It also makes white blood cells, the cells of the immune system, and antibodies. And then lymph nodes, as you can see here by these green little beans, structures. They're small structures that are located in many parts of the body, like our necks, like our armpits. They're in our chest. They're also in our belly and our groin. The lymph nodes actually contain immune cells that help fight infection. They essentially attack and destroy germs that are carried into the nodes from the lymph fluid. So those are some of the main organs. I think it's interesting to point out that the immune cells, or our white blood cells, which are the cells of our immune system again, are made inside the bone marrow. And in the picture here, they show bone marrow coming from our femur, but it's not just the femur, it's essentially the marrow in our bones. And that's where they're made. There are special cells there that can actually differentiate into the white blood cells that we need. And the white blood cells then travel through the body inside the lymph vessels, which are in close contact with the bloodstream. So the actors are the actual cells. And you can see there are neutrophils, there are monocytes, there are eosinophils, specific oftentimes to fight parasites. There are basophils, lymphocytes, and there's different types of lymphocytes, and there's plasma cells. So there's different types of white blood cells. I think the ones that became prominent to me, again, as I was going through the material myself, were the neutrophils and the monocytes, which are the phagocytic cells. That means they eat things and destroy invaders. And they are part of our, what we'll talk about as the innate immune system, or kind of our general or non-specific line of defense. And then the lymphocytes, and specifically the antibodies, are very prominent in our acquired or adaptive immune system, which is our very specific form of defense. So this is essentially what we're talking about when we're talking about the immune system. This is where we are in the body. This is what kinds of cells we're talking about. And we'll go through how some nutrients really connect to these cells. Okay, so I had just mentioned this, but think of the immune system almost as in like 3 levels. There are barriers. Just these are parts of us, parts of the immune system that help keep things out. So there are, in terms of barriers, there are physical barriers. So our skin and our mucous membranes are examples of physical barriers. There are also chemical barriers like the acid in our stomach, which sometimes people think of as bad, but there are benefits to it in terms of not only digestion, but also killing invaders, and digestive enzymes, which are actually alkaline. But the chemical barriers are actually can be pH related or acidic or non-acidic. And then there's biological barriers. So the gut is one example of a microbiome, and microbiomes are protective to us. So we have barriers. Then in terms of the actual immune system working on a smaller level or a molecular level, we have what's called innate immunity, and this is our non-specific or general defense. And the cells that feature prominently in the innate immune system are our white blood cells called the neutrophils, and the monophytes, which become macrophages. They engulf and destroy or eat or phagocytose foreign invaders like bacteria or viruses or others, and they also take care of damaged cells. So the innate immune system is something that happens quickly, usually within minutes. So if there's been a penetration from a barrier or if something has gotten into our system that shouldn't be there, the innate immune system reacts immediately. And it's non-specific in the sense that it acts the same way no matter what. It acts in approximately the same way no matter what is coming in. So it doesn't have a targeted approach. It just has kind of this quick attack approach and kill. And what we'll see coming up is that what's prominent in the innate immune system is what's called an oxidative burst. And it's essentially when the white blood cells are putting out these very caustic things to kill the invader. And it's an oxidative burst. So it's like a blast. And again, it's immediate and non-specific. The acquired immune system then is something that takes a little bit longer to develop, sometimes days or weeks. And it's great because it becomes very specific to the actual invader. So it's also called, it's acquired, it's adaptive, it's something that our body learns to do based on what is invading. And so this is where the complex, customized response to a specific pathogen or invader comes into play. So what happens is the actual organism or pathogen or bacteria or virus, for example, might, once it's in, and if it hasn't been completely quelched by the innate immune system, our acquired immune system is triggered. And what happens is the actual pathogen stimulates the production of specific white blood cells, the lymphocytes in particular, T cells and B cells. And the T cells will target and destroy the specific pathogen. And then the B cells are going to be the ones that create the antibodies that will be very specific to the pathogen. So they're more deadly in that sense. And they also will contain memory for the pathogen so that if the body sees this pathogen again, it's going to then be able to recognize it quickly and ramp up quickly to outnumber it. Okay. So hopefully that's a good general overview. We looked at what's happening, the organs inside our body. We looked at the cells. Now we're looking at how the immune system here is divided. And then we're going to look at 3 key features because this is where the nutrients come into play. So as I mentioned, the oxidative burst is a key feature. And this typically is features in the innate immune system. It's what's going to happen right away. It's going to be a blast. So certain immune cells, particularly the neutrophils and the macrophages, are going to produce a concentrated burst of these reactive oxygen species. These are just like caustic molecules or compounds. They're damaging substances that will kill what's trying to invade. So this is good in the sense that it can try and attack the invader, but the connection with nutrition here or specific micronutrients is that if you have too much exposure to these damaging substances, it can actually lead to damage to healthy cells and tissues that is unwanted. So the important nutrients here are the antioxidant nutrients that actually help keep this oxidative burst, quote unquote, in check. it keeps it so that it kills what we want to kill, but doesn't kill too much of the good cells and tissues. So vitamin C and vitamin E, I think, are very common antioxidants that people are aware of, and they function here. They also function elsewhere, and they have other functions, but the antioxidant activity that these vitamins have are helpful in this stage. And then you might not have thought of some minerals as having antioxidant activity, but iron, zinc, copper, and selenium are also known as potent antioxidants. Okay, so then moving on, that's the first key feature, and you can see the nutrients involved, and we'll look a little more in depth in some of the nutrients in a bit. Then there's the proliferation, which proliferation essentially just means that we are increasing the number or amount of something. And in this case, we're talking about immune cells, particularly the B cells that lead to plasma cells that then lead to this army of specific antibodies that know exactly what they're looking for and can target it and can eliminate it effectively. So the immune system in general is constantly producing cells, especially as it puts cells out, it needs to replenish itself. And so when it encounters a foreign invader and when it ramps up, you have a lot of resources going into the immune system to create a proliferative phase. And that means it's going to need to be replenished. The proliferation phase requires a lot of energy. It requires a lot of building blocks. And I immediately think of like amino acids from protein foods that we eat that are needed for anything structural, any cell, any compound. It's going to need structure, and anything structural in our body is made from, largely is composed of a lot of amino acids. And then it's also going to need cofactors. And I think of cofactors as like helpers. And nutrients, micronutrients, particularly vitamins and minerals, can be cofactors to produce all of these cells and substances that are needed to mount an effective response. Because there are cells, right? There's the B cells, which are lymphocytes. There are plasma cells, which come from the B cells. There are antibodies. All of those are cells. But then don't forget, there's also substances, and I think of signaling molecules. So in order for all this to happen, cells need to communicate with each other, and they actually secrete substances, which is like a form of communication. And those substances also require building blocks and energy and cofactors. So it's not just the cells that are needed that need to proliferate and need all these resources, but it's all the signaling that needs to happen all over your body that is also requires a great deal of resources. So the nutrients that are important in the proliferation you'll see iron and zinc, which were antioxidants in the oxidative burst stage. But then you're also going to see a couple of fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A and D, and then these B vitamins, folate, B12, and B6, which B vitamins are often very much needed when you have growth and repair, or growth and replication. So when you have something that's growing or getting bigger in number and you need replication, these B vitamins can play big roles. And so hopefully you can start to see the connection in terms of how the vitamins or the minerals actually work in the body. And this is just in the immune system. So they have other functions, but this is immune specific. And then inflammation. So inflammation is a key feature of any kind of infection process, or when it's a signal for when the immune system is activated. It's usually directed at a specific area that's been affected, wherever the invasion took place. And people, I think of, and people think of inflammation as causing heat, maybe pain, maybe swelling, maybe redness. And all of those things are actually involved in helping draw more resources to the site of the injury or the infection. So, and this is a good thing, it's to help promote healing. However, just as like in the oxidative burst part of the immune system, when you have too much inflammation, too much can be a negative thing. So the omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA, are very potent anti-inflammatory agents, and they actually come into play here, typically by getting incorporated into cell membranes. And then from there, they can actually help produce anti-inflammatory compounds. They can help regulate the inflammation process so that it does not become excessive or excessively damaging. So those are the nutrients that I'm going to call out. We'll talk about a couple of other more bigger pieces here in a minute, but those are the features. So to summarize then, we looked at where the immune system is in our body, we looked at some of the important cells, and we looked at kind of how it works here in terms of the features. You have the innate immune system blasting the invader. You have the adaptive immune system over time learning a lot about the invader and then developing a specific antibody response to it and being able to proliferate in order to outnumber, or if not outnumber, at least compete with the invader so that it can be eliminated or destroyed. And then inflammation is just something that happens in order to help facilitate all these processes. So let's turn now to the role of nutrition. Hopefully it's clear how the immune system might need to rely on an adequate supply of nutrients for basic functions and then for ramping up when needed and over time. So it will happen, at one instance in time, and then if it's called upon again to fight the same infection, we're going to need a quick and very rapid proliferative response then too. Malnutrition of protein or calories or both, and micronutrient deficiencies, and what we're talking about here are minerals and vitamins, these are both very well known to impair our immune responses and our immunity. And I've said this before in other talks I've given, but I think it's pretty compelling that malnutrition is the primary cause of immunodeficiency worldwide. So when you see people who have inadequate calories and or protein or both, you find that the rates of infection and infectious diseases are higher, and the mortality associated with those are also higher. I also want to put a caution statement in here just to make a point that excess micronutrient, meaning mineral and vitamin supplementation, is not always better. And so I'll say this again, I think in the next slide, but a lot of times when I think it's, most people understand that when they might have an infection or chronic infections over time, that their body is kind of using up a lot of their resources and they might be low in minerals or vitamins. And I think logically it makes sense to say, well, then I need to take extra. But I put this caution statement in here because in practice, I see a lot of people using too much. That's what's more common, meaning excess micronutrient supplementation. So I've tried to weave that into the rest of my talk when we get to the micronutrients. But I want to underscore that because there are a lot of instances where too much of one particular supplement is actually more harmful. And so you don't want to do damage and you don't want to do harm, although you do want adequate amounts. Okay, so I also want to underscore this point. So maintaining a healthy weight usually means you are maintaining a good nutritional status, and eating a nutrient-rich diet imparts strong immunity and strong resistance to infection. In the setting of bronchiectasis or NTM lung disease, where you might be fighting infection on a somewhat regular basis, good nutritional status from my perspective, with my experience, means a BMI of over 18.5 and ideally closer to 21. And I've spoke about this in other talks, but I want to reiterate this here. So malnutrition doesn't just mean you're not, malnutrition doesn't just mean that you're severely ill. It can also mean that you're underweight. That is on the spectrum. And so we like to see people maintain even sometimes a higher than normal weight, especially if your body weight is sometimes on the lower end. Your calorie needs may be increased by approximately 30%, sometimes less, sometimes more, when you have infection or have a history of it. Your protein needs may also be increased by up to this much due to increased utilization. I think, as you could see, there's a lot of structural things happening in your immune system that need the building blocks or the amino acids that come from protein foods. And then your micronutrient needs may also be increased because you're using more of them. There is also a possible feature of losses too. When you have infection, you might be losing more of them, either through potentially through your gut or through your urine. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to take very large doses of supplements in order to replace them, because excess is not always better. Okay, so then let's move to the micronutrients. And this is where I kind of got lost, because I'm interested in this even just for the people for whom, the people that I counsel, as well as for myself. I find it really interesting, and I can't, it's hard to remember sometimes where some of these vitamins and minerals come from. But I picked vitamin C in part because it was one of the first ones in the oxidative burst feature of the immune system. And most people know this as an antioxidant, and a lot of people I see in practice are supplementing with it. So vitamin C functions both in the functions in the oxidative burst section. It essentially prevents or repairs damage to immune cells caused by these reactive oxygen species. It also maintains white blood cells. So it may increase the production and function of neutrophils and macrophages. Those are the cells that eat the bad guys, and the lymphocytes, which are important for the adaptive immune system. So I put up here the nutrient in looking at vitamin C, the RDA, and then some sources. So let's go through this. For vitamin C, the RDA for adult men is 90 milligrams per day. For women, it's 75 milligrams per day. I think it's reasonable to think that it may be helpful to get a little bit more, ideally from your diet, which I do think is doable. Harvard has some statements out there saying that they recommend 200 to 300 milligrams of vitamin C per day, and that's from Dr. Walter Willett. The Linus Pauling Institute goes up to 400 milligrams per day because they think there is benefit. You'll see with good sources, the diet really can deliver, as I said. But as a tip, if you decide to supplement, because a lot of people are, please don't take more than 250 milligrams of supplemental vitamin C at one time, or choose an extended release formulation, because your body can only absorb about 250 milligrams of vitamin C at any one time. If you take a big heavy dose of it, you're more likely to just lose it through your urine, and you won't actually utilize it and benefit from it. So popping over to the good diet sources, I had fun. Actually, I probably got a little bit out of hand, but I was super interested, because I actually thought that you'd find most of the vitamin C in fruits. And it is true that if you look at this, strawberries, a cup of whole strawberries has 85 milligrams. So in the context of trying to achieve 100, 200, 300, or 400 milligrams per day, that's a good amount. Strawberries are high. The other berries are not as high, but certainly do contribute some. Raspberries a cup have 40 milligrams. Where's the other one? Blackberries a cup is 20. Blueberries a cup is 15. If you look, what was really surprising to me were the bell peppers. So a sweet red bell pepper, one whole one, has 152 milligrams of vitamin C. And the sweet yellow pepper, a large one, has 352. So I was like, my eyeballs got really big when I saw that. I've always known that the bell peppers are high in vitamin C, but I didn't realize that they were so high. And the other good thing about bell peppers, the sweet ones, are that they're not necessarily reflux triggers. So I would recommend paying that price for the bell peppers. You'll see though that did I put green bell peppers on here? I didn't. Green bell peppers aren't quite as high as the red, yellow, and orange, but they are also good sources, and they're not as expensive. The other bell peppers are expensive, but I think they're worth it, and I think they're delicious. I think they go on salads. They go on, like, if you're just looking for a good side, a crunchy vegetable side, I would steer you towards bell peppers, particularly in the winter months. I do this on a regular basis, so hummus has become kind of a staple of my diet, and I typically do it with a full bell pepper. I'll cut up like some of each, the red, yellow, and the orange, and I'll just eat them raw along with like carrots or snap peas as a side with hummus. That could be a snack, it could be a meal. So that's my plug for bell peppers for today. You'll also see that there are some other good fruits that aren't as surprising. Kiwi fruit are high, oranges and other citrus are high. I put juice from one lemon because I thought it was going to be more than that, but it's 20 milligrams. Bananas and apples, which I eat regularly all year round, are relatively low. They're good in other things, but lower in vitamin C. And then I wanted to highlight some vegetables too. So a cup of cooked broccoli and a cup of cooked Brussels sprouts are both high. So I thought that was really nice because they're cooked. So vitamin C is a temperature sensitive vitamin, and in theory, it's going to be broken down with heat. But even cooked, these vegetables are relatively high. And certainly if you eat them raw, you're also going to get good benefits. Kale is on there, but you can imagine other greens like spinach, or broccoli rabe or bok choy or other green vegetables are going to be high. I put sweet potato and butternut squash on there because they're orange. They may be higher in carotenoids, but they do contain some vitamin C. So in any case, that was a long piece on vitamin C, but I think you can see that you can achieve that with your diet, and it's not necessarily needed to supplement. Okay, moving on. Vitamin E was also one of the nutrients in the oxidative burst. It's an antioxidant, and it also maintains immune cells. It sustains the functions of the lymphocytes in our adaptive system. It protects the cell membranes. It also reduces the production of factors that are immunosuppressive. So if we look at vitamin E, the RDA is 15 milligrams per day for men and women. And some good sources, people are always wondering if one nut is better than another, and I generally always recommend a variety, but almonds happen to be very high in vitamin E. So an ounce will have 7 milligrams, nearly half of what you need. Sunflower oil is surprisingly high, and there was a time last year that I was picking sunflower oil because of the polyunsaturated fats, and now I know that it's also high in vitamin E. So a tablespoon, which is not very much, contains 6 milligrams. And I put olive oil down there just because I use a lot of that, and I think a lot of people use a lot of that. It's not quite as high, but there is some in vitamin E in olive oil. You'll see the fat-soluble nutrients like vitamins A, D, E, and K in the higher fat foods, including oils. And then avocado, which is good in the winter, 2.7 milligrams in a whole avocado. So a couple of points here. Fat can be very healthy for you, and I do recommend including it. And a variety of oils can also be good. The sunflower oil is something that cooks at high heat too. So you can use it in cooking for higher heat cooking, and you can kind of just put it into your rotation. You can also choose to do seeds, sunflower seeds, for example. Okay. I'm going through the oxidative burst nutrients. These are some of the minerals that are important as antioxidants. So iron is here working as an antioxidant. It not only helps in the oxidative burst, but it assists in a lot of enzymes. And it assists in the proliferative feature of the immune system. So it actually helps produce the T lymphocytes, which are important in our adaptive immune system or immune response. So I wanted to caution, I do counsel that avoiding supplemental iron is probably best. It's probably keeping you more safe. In other words, we're trying to be more safe than sorry. And that's especially true if you're postmenopausal or a man, because postmenopausal women aren't losing iron. And a lot of vitamins and minerals contain iron. And some of them, especially the prenatal ones, contain more than you would need, a lot more than the RDA when you're age 50 or older. So we do think that supplemental iron may potentially contribute to fostering the growth of the mycobacteria, or just promoting the infection in any of a variety of ways. There's a number of instances in the literature that discuss how giving oral iron to people who have infections seems to make things worse, even in the setting of having lower iron levels. So, and that's what I'm going to address next. But again, I would prefer any kind of multivitamin that doesn't have iron, like Centrum Silver. And then the other generic equivalents to those would be like Target's Up and Up brand, adult multivitamin for people age 50 or over. And Equate also has a brand that I'm forgetting right off the top of my head, but it's the Walmart brand. Maybe it's Equate. It's Walmart's brand. And they have an adult multivitamin for 50 plus that is also equivalent to Centrum Silver. So I'd recommend those. And the second point I'm making here is because this is another topic that comes up, but iron status is something that a lot of people are concerned about. They're concerned about having what looks like an apparent anemia. And the point I'm making here is that iron status in people who have an infection tends to go down. And we think that may be a protective mechanism, that the body sequesters iron to help mitigate the infection. So rather than having a low iron status be indicative of a true iron deficiency anemia, it might just be your body's response to the infection. And this requires someone who's familiar with this process to evaluate it if you're concerned about it. Okay, so iron's important. Try and get it from your diet. For the RDA for men and women 51 years and older is only 8 milligrams a day. For women younger, it's 18. But I think for this population, most of you are going to fall into the 51 years and older. So if you look at, I think of animal sources, and this is another reason why I probably encourage people to include some animal sources of protein, even if they have been historically more vegetarian or more plant-based. But even if there's fish or seafood that you're willing to include, I think it's a good reason to include it, the iron content. You'll see that beef and tuna, and I put chicken breast and salmon up here because a lot of people eat those too. But you'll see that those are significant sources. Lentils, yay for plants. If you can tolerate lentils, I can't eat too many lentils at any one given time, but I can do a half a cup cooked. They're high in fiber, they're high in protein, they're high in iron. And I put pumpkin seeds up here. I actually keep some in my freezer just to eat on soups or on salads, and I lightly toast them, but they're super high. And just as a word on plant-based sources of iron, they aren't as well absorbed because they're in a non-heme form. They're in a form that's not as bioavailable. So typically combining the plant-based sources of iron with something that's going to contain vitamin C, your bell peppers, for example, on a salad with pumpkin seeds and lentils on top could potentially be a good combination, does help. A source of ascorbic acid or vitamin C does help with the absorption of plant-based sources of iron. So that's a good combination. Additionally, eating any animal source of iron, whether that's chicken, fish, or meat, or eggs, it does also help absorb the plant-based sources. So if you had a piece of tuna on your salad with the pumpkin seeds and the lentils, it would help the heme iron in the tuna would help absorb, or the animal source of protein would help absorb the plant-based source of iron. Sorry, getting protein and iron mixed up there. But so again, I think it's possible to get the iron from your diet if you can choose very iron-rich, protein-rich, nutrient-rich foods. Okay, going to zinc, again, another nutrient that helps in the oxidative burst. So it helps because it's an antioxidant. It also assists in more than 300 enzymes, and it also helps in the proliferative phase. So it actually helps produce the lymphocytes, again, that are good for the acquired or adaptive immune response. I want to caution here again, though, because I see a lot of excessive supplemental zinc that's being taken. So the goal is to, if you're going to supplement, to use less than 40 milligrams per day. 40 milligrams is the tolerable upper intake level, above which there can be adverse effects. And similar to iron, your zinc status also can decrease in the setting of infection. And again, that may be a protective mechanism of your body. So realize that your body's in flux, and it's just, there's a very sophisticated kind of thing, there's a lot of things going on in the setting of infection that can affect not only what you need, but what your status is of some of these micronutrients. Okay, copper and selenium, these are the last two antioxidants that were good for the oxidative burst. And so I've added them here as well. And just as a side note, I always think of Brazil nuts when I think of selenium. Just as a disclosure, I tend to eat about 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a day because they're high in selenium. More than that can be toxic. So you don't want to eat too many, but they are very concentrated sources. So here's a summary of the antioxidant minerals, some of which are also good in the proliferative phase too. But we didn't look specifically at zinc. So what you'll find is that meat sources, as well as fish and seafood and dairy, can be good sources of zinc. Okay, I looked up some other things that I didn't write on here. Let me see if I found. Pumpkin seeds are also high in zinc. They have 2 milligrams per ounce. So pumpkin seeds are good for iron and zinc. We talked about iron. If you go down and look at copper, some good sources are oysters, cashew nuts, and then lentils. So some recurring themes here, nuts and seeds and legumes. And then selenium is also good in some animal-based sources of protein and whole grains. I mentioned the Brazil nuts. Okay, so then moving on, I also wanted to summarize some of the good sources for the nutrients that are important for the other phases. We looked at vitamin C and vitamin E. Vitamin A and vitamin D are also important for the proliferative feature or phase of the immune system. And so with vitamin A, I generally, what's listed here as good sources are eggs, carrots, sweet potatoes, think of yellow and orange, fruits and vegetables. And in general, carotenoids are going to be the pro-vitamin A's in our food sources, and that's what you're going to get out of a lot of fruits and vegetables. So you can see that it doesn't take a lot of a high carotenoid food to meet the RDA. Half a cup of baked sweet potato has 961 micrograms. A carrot, half a cup of raw, has 534. So I would say that's easily doable. That's unlike vitamin D, which is hard to get. It's hard to meet the RDA with your diet. When I think of vitamin D sources, I generally think of salmon. If you were to eat, this has listed pink salmon, 3 ounces has 370. And I generally recommend people eat fish or seafood at least twice a week for the omega-3 fats, which we'll get to, but also as a source for vitamin D. Sardines have a little bit, fortified milk has some, and then sunshine as just the natural source. Our food supply is not very high in vitamin D, so this is one that I do often recommend people consider supplementing with, either from a multivitamin and then another supplemental source that might come with calcium or might just be a standalone, anywhere from a supplemental form in the amount of about 1,000 to 2,000 international units a day. Okay, and then we've spoken about vitamin E. These are I grouped the B vitamins together, which are important in the proliferative phase in terms of helping produce and proliferate any kind of cell. You'll see the B vitamins are needed for that reproduction. And with folate, the RDA is 400 micrograms per day. Lentils come into play, vegetables come into play, and any kind of enriched grain, because the United States has a policy of enriching grains with folate. And that was actually to help prevent neural tube defects in the developing fetus. But it also helps, it helps enrich our food supply and enrich our diets as well. B12, generally you think of animal sources for B12. The RDA is 2.4 micrograms per day. And you'll see that fish and seafood is called out. Mackerel also is a good source of omega-3s, and beef is here as well. In terms of vegetarian sources, you can get B12 in nutritional yeast, and you can also supplement with this as well. The caveat here, though, is that a lot of B vitamins come in very large doses. In other words, excess doses. Vitamin B12 may be one of the exceptions, because usually I'm okay with B12 and the over 500% in a multivitamin, but I prefer it not to be too much higher than that. Like 5,000% of what you need is probably overkill. The other B vitamins tend to also be in that high range, whether it's folate, B6, or others. And I would say that's unnecessary. You really don't want to get up into the 500+% range. You really want to just go up to 100% of what you need, which are in the multivitamins that I mentioned earlier. And then B6 is down here. You can see that, again, salmon or turkey are good sources, so some animal sources. They have the potato with the skin on here, but vegetables will also be good sources too. And then finally, EPA and DHA were the nutrients, important nutrients in connection with regulating the inflammation. They're actually, what I have here is that there is no RDA, because this came from the Linus Pauling infographic, but there is an RDA. It's 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA per day. And you can get that if you're able to consume at least 2 servings, a serving size of about 4 ounces of fish or seafood per week. And I generally recommend the high omega-3 low mercury fishes. So salmon, trout, which is not on here, but herring, mackerel, sardines, even mussels. Those are probably my top go-tos. And if you could pick a serving size that's bigger than 3 ounces, that would be better. At least 4 ounces would be preferred. EPA and DHA are, again, kind of the famous omega-3 fats that are well known for having anti-inflammatory effects, not only for the immune system, but system-wide. And generally, they work by getting incorporated into cell membranes. And then again, from there, they're able to create anti-inflammatory molecules to have beneficial effects in the body. Okay, what am I doing on time? Not too bad. So here are some of my key references. The Linus Pauling Institute maintains a great website. They have the infographic, which I have here, and they have good descriptions, both in brief and more in detail online. I generally use Harvard as a resource, and I look for some textbooks as well that were good resources, and they're listed here. So that closes everything I was able to put in for today. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to try and help answer some questions.
Thank you. All right, we are doing well for time. So first question up, please address high calorie items for lactose intolerant folks.
High calorie items for lactose intolerant folks?
Yeah.
So you may have already heard this, but anytime anyone has a lactose issue, I always try and remind them that they can pick a lactose-free product, whether that's Lactaid or a lactose-free yogurt. There are lactose-free products that are the equivalent of the regular products. So don't forget those. And then really any kind of high protein, higher fat food is going to be higher calories. So I think if I had to go down, my mind always goes to nuts. It goes to nut butters. It goes to seeds. It goes to avocados. It goes to naturally lower lactose dairy. So hard cheeses in particular tend to be very low in lactose. Cottage cheese is even low in lactose naturally. So you may be able to tolerate that. And then again, you can choose a lactose-free version if not. And then think about all of your protein foods, chicken, fish, meat, eggs, and think about cooking those foods with some kind of fat or oil, as well as adding grains that then could be cooked or like you can add oil to something. So I will make brown rice. I'll put toasted sesame oil in it to add fat to the grain. Potatoes and other grains and starches can have fats added to them in the form of oil or potentially butter if you prefer that better. And then you can cook vegetables in oil as well to just have them absorb a lot of oil and get the calories in through the fat that way. That's a very brief overview.
Okay. Somebody's asking, what are your thoughts regarding new chapter fermented zinc complex, which has zinc and copper? They're asking this about immune health.
My first question would be how much zinc and copper are in there, and to make sure that you're not taking too much. A lot of the zinc formulations are 50 milligrams, and that is too much. So I wouldn't recommend a formulation of zinc that is over 40 milligrams per day. I'd probably even prefer it to be in the 20 to 30 milligram range. And so as long as the amount is safe, then I'm okay with it. I think it's interesting that they've paired it with copper, because in excess of zinc supplementation can actually cause a copper deficiency. And that's a negative. So there have been reports in the literature that people who take 60 milligrams per day of zinc can actually trigger a copper deficiency. So it's interesting to me that they've paired them. It makes me worry that there's too much zinc in there, but they're both good. So I'm okay if they're paired as long as the amounts are safe.
Okay. When you mention protein, are you referring to all protein, plant included, or just animal protein? The plant-based community says that following a diversified plant-based diet will meet the protein needs.
Yeah, so you can eat enough protein that's plant-based. If you're, I think anyone who has bronchiectasis or NTMLD has to be diligent about trying to meet their increased protein needs. Again, your needs for protein could be up to, or sometimes even more than 30% of normal, of what you normally would be without the infection or history of infection. So I think it is possible to do it with plant-based sources, as long as you are, I think, being inclusive of potentially things like soy, whether that's tofu or tempeh, or even using plant-based protein powders if needed that are brown rice based or pea protein based. Sometimes those are needed and beneficial, and they're just fine. It is possible to eat all plant-based proteins and still meet to get all the essential proteins that you need, and get the amount.
Okay. So we have a bunch of questions that are related to iron. I guess there's some concern about iron and some of the pathogens and pathogen response. So I'm just going to go through some of those questions now. Is cooking with cast iron pans not recommended for patients with NTM?
Oh, that's a good question. So I'd like to look in. That's a great question. I do know that when you cook with cast iron pans, you do get more iron in your diet. I don't think it's excessive. So my first impression is to say it's probably okay, because you're not getting excessive amounts, but I don't know. That's something I am going to look into, because I don't know exactly. I'd probably try and find out how much iron you get from cooking with cast iron. I'm interested. I don't know the amounts.
I think it is important to note that I guess there is you can get some iron added to your diet by cooking in a cast iron.
Definitely can.
Yeah.
The question is it dangerous?
And is it dangerous for you?
And I don't know. I think it depends on the amount that you're getting.
And what else is in your diet, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Are beets high in iron?
Are beets?
Beets.
I don't know. Can I stop sharing and actually get online?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let me see if I can do it quick. So, and I was going to mention this, my resource for the nutrient contents of foods is the USDA nutrient database. So if you put that into your search engine, it pulls up. It's not the most user friendly, but you should be able to navigate it. So there's a search field, and if I put in beets, I'm going to guess they're not, but you
never know.
you never know. So here we go. Okay, so let's look at beets raw. I realize that people might not be eating them raw, but let's start there. Let's do one whole beet, which might be a medium-sized beet. And sorry, the question is, are they high in iron?
Yes.
So I'm getting that one beet contains 0.6 milligrams of iron. So I wouldn't say that's high, but I would say that's I would say that does contribute significantly. Let me see if I can, I'm curious, hold on. Now I'm gonna go. So a cup of beets contains 1 milligram. And keep in mind, this is a plant-based source, which won't be as readily absorbed. I'm gonna see if I can find cooked beets really quickly, see if there's any difference. Okay, let's look at cooked beets. And I'm gonna go to one whole cooked beet. And for iron, I'm at 0.5 milligrams. So there's not that much difference. Okay. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have somebody asking, they said they're taking 45 milligrams of slow ferritin iron supplement 3 times per week for hair. The ferritin level is okay at 55, but the dermatologist said it should be 70 for hair. Since this person has NTM, should this person stop taking the supplement?
Oh, interesting. This is a first. So they're taking 45 milligrams of iron.
Yeah, it's a slow, I guess it's a slow release, and they're doing it 3 times a week.
Oh, bummer. I would probably say, yeah, I think my advice would be yes, to stop that. But see, it's hard when you're not talking to someone. We would be weighing the benefit to your hair versus the detriment to your infection. And I don't know how you're presenting in terms of how severe you are with your infection and how bad the hair loss is, right? I would have to weigh those things individually, but
Yeah.
my general answer is I'd prefer you stop it.
Okay. Somebody is asking, they're saying, I may have hemochromatosis. What can I do to lower the iron? I don't want it to feed my Pseudomonas.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know, because I would say your doctor should advise you about how to treat the hemochromatosis. I don't know enough about how that's treated, and I don't know if she has phlebotomy, in order to treat that. I don't know how that's actually treated. So I don't have a good answer there. Sorry.
Okay, they were asking about lactoferrin as a treatment for it, but I don't know if lactoferrin is.
I don't know if that binds it. I'm not qualified to answer that.
Yeah. Okay. I think that we've hit the highlights with iron. So let's go back. Somebody was asking about the vitamin C food source chart. So they wanted you to put it back up, but let me just say, we will get that chart. We're going to, first of all, the slides will be made available with the video, but I think there are certain things in this presentation, including the vitamin C chart, that might be useful for us to get that and put that up online. So maybe we'll arrange to have that done this coming week.
Do you want me to share it right now? I can share.
Yeah, sure. That would be great.
Okay.
You can put it up on the screen, but we'll make sure that it also gets up online.
Okay, there it is.
Perfect. Thank you. Somebody's asking, are walnuts good?
Yes, they are good. They probably are good. So off the top of my head, I know they are high in omega-3 fats that are plant-based. So that's alpha linolenic acid. So they're one of the 2 nuts that are really high in that. So they're good for that reason. They're also high in protein. They're going to probably have some good vitamin E in them. And there's going to be some other minerals in there as well that I just can't name off the top of my head. But I would say everything that we've seen here is there's going to be some component of it in a walnut. So I try to include walnuts in my rotation of daily nuts.
Okay. Do you have a viewpoint on immune support supplements such as Airborne?
Airborne?
Yeah.
No, I do not. And it would depend on what's in them. So I'd look exactly what's in them.
Okay. Somebody's asking, can you say something about vitamin D with K2? They're told it helps to absorb calcium.
Yeah. So vitamin D3 helps absorb calcium in our gut, which is where we need to absorb it, the calcium, as well as the other nutrients we have. So there's no question that that's one of the primary prominent functions and benefits of vitamin D3. K2 is this has become very popular. And I think it's likely that, so I also believe vitamin K helps with bone health. I don't know if K2, the specific isomer that people seem very attached to, is really that significant, but I think it's unlikely to hurt. So I think it's probably not hurting and maybe helping. I know the vitamin D is helping. So as long as you're not getting excessive amounts, I think it's probably beneficial.
Okay. EPA and DHA, what are good EPA and DHA sources for vegetarians?
Right. So what are good sources for vegetarians? So let me think. Okay, so why am I drawing a blank here? I know there's supplements that are vegetarian, and I often recommend people who don't eat fish or seafood consider those. I also recommend plant sources of the plant-based omega-3s, not that you get a lot of conversion. You get some, very little, but they are good omega-3s in general. So whether that's pecans or walnuts or some of the vegetable oils that are going to be decent sources of the ALA, I recommend those. What else could you do with EPA and DHA for vegetarian sources? I know algal sources can be good sources, and that's where the supplements come from. But honestly, I don't have a good answer right off the top of my head for that, other than supplemental sources or other plant-based sources of just the plant-based omega-3, which is the alpha linolenic acid.
Okay.
So sorry, I'm not
No,
coming. Yeah.
I mean, that specific area might require a little bit more in-depth research. Is flaxseed recommended for omega-3?
So yes, that's one of the plant-based omega-3.
Okay.
So flax seeds, sorry, I should have mentioned that. Flax seeds, chia seeds, and hemp seeds will also have the plant-based sources of omega-3,
Great.
which is specifically ALA.
How bad is refined sugar to inflammation?
So I think refined sugar is definitely on the unhappy list when it comes to inflammation. I think it's up there with saturated fat. So I see it as one of the main targets. Having said that, it's okay to include some of it in your diet, particularly if you're trying to gain weight. And if you can do it in a reasonable way in terms of with mixed meals, so you don't get such big blood sugar and insulin spikes after you eat. That's what I generally recommend. I don't want to demonize it so people don't eat it, but there's a lot of other things to eat. And then if you can have a little bit of refined sugar for pleasure, that's fine. That's a good way to include it.
Okay. Please address food-derived vitamin and mineral supplements.
I like that concept. And I think what I would say is I still, I don't, so what I would still check though, so I like the concept. What I would still check, however, is that that supplement has been third-party certified. So I would look at Consumer Labs website. I would also look at USP. I'd look for a third-party certifier and I'd want one of those.
And for those of you who missed it, we did have a webinar on supplements late last year, and that video is online, so you can check that out. And there's information about third-party certification in that webinar. Next question. I am on an anti-candida diet with very low carbs. What high calorie and protein foods can I eat?
Yeah, okay. So then you're looking at nuts and nut butters, seeds, oils, avocados, dairy if you're willing to do dairy, and then all of your protein foods, which also includes dairy, but also chicken, fish, and meat and eggs. You can do vegetables that are cooked in oil, sauteed, roasted, grilled, stir-fried, etc. You can still do it. it takes more attention and more fat, but it can be done.
How does gluten affect the immune system?
So that's a good, I should have anticipated that question. As far as I'm aware, gluten is okay for the immune system. Having said that, there are anecdotal reports of gluten causing inflammation. However, I don't think that's a general truth. That's true for everybody. I think you have to if you experience symptoms upon eating gluten, then that's an issue. Most people do not. So I think gluten in general is okay and a healthy component of a diet.
Okay. Is half a cup of walnuts with oatmeal a good way to try and gain weight? Also hazelnuts and raisins as a snack. Is there a limitation on nuts? They're using it to gain weight.
Okay, is there a limitation on nuts? With the exception of Brazil nuts, I think my answer is no on that.
Yeah.
So yes, I think half a cup of walnuts with oatmeal is great. I think hazelnuts and raisins are also great. I frequently pull out the 1 cup of pecans is close to 800 calories or something like that equivalence. So nuts are a really good way to get in a lot of protein and fat and extra calories, and they're generally very, very healthy. I always recommend unsalted if at all possible.
And just as a reminder to people, the reason we say excluding Brazil nuts is a Brazil nut is apparently one of the most radioactive foods on the planet. So don't eat too much of them. Somebody's writing, they have MAC. How is how is a compromised immune system measured? I think that's a separate question. It has to do with testing to see what their immunoglobulin levels and blood cell levels are at. But they're asking about where can they go to get proper nutrition to fight their infection, I guess. Other than here, we've had some excellent webinars on nutrition, so make sure you check those out.
I guess if the question is about resources, I like the Harvard School of Public Health Nutrition Source website. I like the Linus Pauling website. Those are really good, in addition to other well-recognized experts, although there's a lot of different opinions out there.
I think in addition to getting the charts from you, maybe we'll get that list of resources that you posted at the end, so we can also send that out and add those links to our website as well, so that people can get access. Somebody who had asked about the fermented zinc complex by New Chapter, they put in the Q&A that it's 15 milligrams of zinc and 1.5 milligrams of copper.
Right, so that's too much zinc in my opinion. So maybe if you want to take that, take one every other day.
Okay.
To get half dose, or cut it in half. And I missed that it was fermented, so I find that unusual. I'm not sure what it is that's fermented. So I just find that curious, because you don't actually ferment the element of zinc or copper.
Right.
So something else is fermented, and I'm not sure. I don't know if there are probiotics in there too. Maybe that's the benefit. Not sure.
I take mycophenolate to suppress my immune system due to Sjogren's. How does that work with trying to eat well to build my immune system?
Trying to remember if mycophenolate is the one that has increased needs for folate. Does this person also take folate by any chance?
They didn't say, but they
Okay.
can always drop that in the comments. But
Yeah. You know, those medications are so important for treating the condition that you're taking that I underscore or emphasize that we want you to take those medications as prescribed. You may feel that you're more vulnerable because you're taking them, and that may be true. So I'm thinking of common sense things like try and avoid exposures where you can, wear your mask, practice social distancing, try not to go out into crowds, et cetera, et cetera. Test before you meet up with crowds, have other people test if possible. And then I'm speaking about COVID, but trying to avoid symptomatic people. So avoiding exposures is a common sense thing. And then essentially like doing all the wellness things, eating, trying to maintain a healthy weight, eating a nutrient-rich diet, getting enough sleep, trying to get reasonable, adequate exercise. All of those things can decrease inflammation and promote immune strength.
great. Can you address probiotics for folks with respect to gut biome maintenance when we're not actively taking antibiotics? Things like shelf stable versus refrigerated. Is it good to switch out brands and formulas to get a mix and so forth?
Yeah, so I'm gonna delay that to our probiotics talk because because I don't have necessarily an answer right off the bat, and I will probably be doing some more reading just to try and get good up-to-date information on that.
I think
Probiotics are missing from this, but they are a big part of our biological barrier, our microbiome, whether it's in our lungs or our guts or elsewhere. So I think it's an important topic. And in general, maybe I'll just say this, I think in general, they are more beneficial than they are potentially harmful. It's hard to know what specific probiotics are going to be best for you. But I do think there's a lot of benefit. I think the downsides are primarily the cost. And again, just as an aside and off the cuff, I do think both refrigerated and non-refrigerated forms can be beneficial. Hopefully I'll have more to say about that when I develop my talk for
yes, that is, it's so important. It has its own webinar this year. Are protein powders acceptable?
They are, yes. And in general, I like protein powders. I think they're expensive, so that's the downside, kind of like probiotics, but I think they can be very useful.
Somebody had an experience where they started antibiotics and their white blood cell count went down. They were stopped and then restarted. It came up a little bit, but it's still low normal. They're wondering if this is common, and I know that, yes, that can happen with certain antibiotics. They're used to treat NTM. But I don't know how often you see it with your patients and if there's anything you can address with respect to nutrition for it.
Yeah, that's not a topic that comes up a lot for me. So I would defer this to the person's provider.
Okay. Which Ensure protein drink is more beneficial if you want to gain weight and get stronger if you have NTM?
So I really like Ensure Enlive, which is formulated with HMB. That is a unique ingredient that actually has been shown to increase lean body mass in critically ill patients or people who have lost lean body mass, either because they're older or their physical activity has gone down. So Ensure Enlive is the only Ensure formula right now that I'm aware of that's on the market that contains it. And the dose you want, so Ensure Enlive is high calorie, it's high protein, and it has the HMB in the 1.5 gram dose. You want that twice a day to get the maximum benefit.
I checked And my Centrum Silver has 8 milligrams of iron. Should I switch to a different multivitamin for women over 50?
Okay, so there is, I wonder if that's the Centrum Silver adult 50 plus. There is a Centrum Silver that does not, that has 0 iron in it, and that's probably what I would recommend.
Okay. We have a comment that goes back to the iron, excess iron. Lactoferrin apparently does block excess iron. So, but again, I think we'll go back to the answer that was given before, that it's something that your physician should be advising on treatment,
Yeah.
as to whether it is a good treatment for you. What foods would be best as an anti-inflammatory? I think we actually had did we have a webinar about this subject
We
already?
did. It's on the
We
YouTube
did.
channel. Yeah.
Yes, we have a webinar, so I would strongly urge you to check that out. We had a very good webinar on that topic. So please head over to our YouTube channel, check that out. Is dark chocolate beneficial in some way? It's a good question.
It is a good question. I feel like I'm surprised if I haven't addressed this. So yes, dark chocolate's high in flavonols, which are anti-inflammatory. Generally, you want 70% dark chocolate or higher in order to get the flavonols. And I mean, I don't. Consumer Lab has top picks for dark chocolate, and they have highlighted the Choco Love brand of dark chocolate bars, the 70%, which I think is their strong, and then their extra strong, which I think is 77%, as having high flavonols and low levels of cadmium. So apparently a number of chocolates have cadmium in them as a downside. So ideally you pick a chocolate that's low in cadmium but high in flavonols. So that's usually what I recommend, either the Choco Love brand, or there's another one that they recommend. It's a Montezuma brand, but that's 100% pure. And I'm the only person that I know of that likes that. Because everyone thinks it's just too bitter, I guess. I really like it.
Somebody was asking if you could actually put the protein chart up on the slides that you have.
Oh, I don't think I have a protein chart. What I have is, I have that.
Okay, that might be all right. Okay, well that is what we have up. Is quercetin quercetin okay, a good supplement, and do you need vitamin C supplement if you're taking it?
That's a good question. I know quercetin became popular, or from my perspective, became popular with COVID. So I wonder if it's being promoted as an antioxidant. The answer is I don't know. I don't know enough about quercetin. And maybe, I don't know if that's something I could probably do I stopped sharing, and I'm going to do a quick Consumer Lab check on quercetin. Do we have time? You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. No, I'm not. Quercetin, Quercitin. They have not reviewed it. Okay, so unfortunately, so I would need to do more research into that. I'm not as familiar with it. I tend to be a little skeptical as well. So I'm not going to endorse it, but I just don't have enough information about it, and Consumer Lab hasn't reviewed it.
Okay. Let me see. Is coffee good for you?
Well, it's a reflux trigger because it has caffeine, unfortunately. It is well known, though, to have flavonols that are health promoting. So I think you have to weigh on balance. Like, it's a reflux trigger. We want you to, for most people, we're going to say we want you to limit it. If you have 1 small cup in the morning, maybe that's a good balance, 1 cup being maybe 6 ounces. And then as long as you don't have a consistent diuretic effect from it, I would say there are health promoting compounds in coffee.
Okay. A couple of comments that I just want to read out that are might be helpful to people. On iron, just in case, this is regarding hemochromatosis. Somebody's commenting they had very good results in lowering ferritin using IP6, which is a chelator, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Anything that's going to bind iron is going to take it out of your system.
Great. Somebody's asking, what role does magnesium have?
Oh, right, because I didn't necessarily call it out. That's a good question. So it's immune specifically. Let me try and think. I mean, as a general blanket statement, I would say all nutrients are important to the immune system. The ones that I've called out, we know might have more prominent roles, but all nutrients in some ways are cofactors, meaning they aid in metabolic reactions, they facilitate them, or in some cases they catalyze them, or some of these minerals are actual structurally involved in some of the cells, and so they're part of the structure and function of the cells. So just because I didn't call it out doesn't mean that it's not important. It's just not something that is necessarily the focus of immune specific minerals. So I'm going to say it's important overall, not only for your overall general health, but probably just as a foundational nutrient for your immunity and overall health.
Okay, we want to go back to chocolate for a minute because we have a few questions about that. Somebody's asking about caffeine and reflux. Does that also hold true for dark chocolate?
You know, there are small amounts of caffeine in dark chocolate, and that is one of the reasons why it's also, sorry, I should have thought of that. I just got so enamored with the idea of chocolate for a minute.
We know the feeling. It is a food group after all.
Darn. Well, okay, so yes, so dark chocolate is one of the more potent reflux triggers. I will give you that. I'm just going to go back to the moderation piece. You know, if you have a couple of squares of dark chocolate, you'll be able to get some of the pleasure benefits, some of the flavonol benefits without overdoing maybe the reflux downsides. And if you can eat the chocolate earlier in the day with foods that are also going to, grains or starches that are going to anchor that in your stomach, that's probably better.
Yeah, don't do what I did the other night and have it at night, because you will get reflux, and I can attest to that firsthand. Learn from my experience and don't do that. It was really good dark chocolate, but somebody actually wanted you to ask, can you mention your dark chocolate pick again? Did you say it was Montezuma?
Yeah, so it's Montezuma is 100% dark chocolate. It's a chocolate that's made out of the UK that Consumer Lab happened to test, and they found that it was highest in flavonols and lowest in cadmium. And you only have to do like 4 of the little squares to get the recommended amount of flavonols a day. But I'm telling you, it is not sweet. That is not a sweet chocolate.
No, 100% wouldn't be.
It's 100% not sweet, but it's solid chocolate, so you can buy it online.
Yeah,
it's like 100% absolute dark chocolate or something. And then again, no, I have get no benefit from plugging any brands, unfortunately. Maybe no, that's probably a good thing, but that's probably a good thing. But they also recommend Ghirardelli's 100% dark cocoa powder, which I've grown very fond of taking my overripe bananas and putting them in my freezer, and then taking them out in the morning and peeling them, although you could potentially peel them before you freeze them, but then mash them with the cocoa powder, and to me, it's like a chocolate dessert. And again, it's doesn't have sugar, and it's got flavonols, but it's got the caffeine too. So just be careful.
Moderation and not at night.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
Somebody was asking about the Brazil nut and radioactivity. So I'll just revisit that for a second. Brazil nuts have high selenium content.
I know, I was laughing. I was like, should I say something?
Selenium is a radioactive nuclide. So yes, if you have too much of it, you are absolutely going to get that lovely glow. No, it's yes, you can get selenium poisoning, and selenium poisoning, the symptoms are actually very similar to radioactive radiation poisoning. So you really shouldn't have too many of them, unfortunately. They are healthy, but in very low doses. One nut is enough to give you your full RDA of selenium. It turns out humans don't really need a whole lot of radioactive substance in their diet. So go figure. Somebody's asking, are sauteed garlic cloves okay?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Any advice on typical herbs associated in teas, cooking, etc., for immunity? Things like garlic, turmeric, ginger, elderberry.
Oh, I didn't address that. That's a good, um, gosh. And I'm not well versed in this, but I would say yes, probably a lot of herbs and spices, and the berries in particular are going to be just antioxidant related. But herbs and spices, I mean, they contain compounds that are biologically active that are beneficial from an anti-inflammatory standpoint. So I'm a fan, as long as it's not a lot of salt.
Okay. We have questions on probiotic and fermented foods, yogurt, kombucha, pickled things. Do you have any advice on taking it? Do you encourage it? Things like kimchi. Does it cause GERD or trigger it?
Yeah. So in general, fermented foods are considered to be very helpful because of their probiotic content. And that includes yogurt. It includes the things that you mentioned, the kimchi. It includes kombucha. Kefir is actually one of the most concentrated sources of probiotics that I have found. So what I would say is, in general, it is good to include those in their diet unless they cause symptoms of reflux. And we know that it's a trigger for you, like a very acidic food, like, kombucha a lot of times is also carbonated. So between the acid content and the carbonation, that could potentially be problematic from a reflux perspective. The kimchi can be spicy. So the actual makeup of the food could potentially promote reflux. So I think you just have to be mindful of that. The dairy products that are fermented are less likely to promote reflux. So I think those might be more beneficial. And I definitely recommend those.
Somebody's asking, is decaf okay? I guess like for coffee or tea.
Yeah. So decaf has less caffeine, but it still has caffeine. So caffeine free is always preferred, or less caffeine. So I guess if you're trying to moderate, decaf is probably better than full caffeine, as long as the quantity you're drinking is still limited. I would still limit it to 1 or 2 small cups a day or in the morning.
Do you suggest taking a drink like Ensure for protein?
If you need it, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. Somebody's saying an internal medicine doctor recommended through 30,000 to 50,000 IUs of vitamin D per day for 3 days at the beginning of an illness. What they've read on this is that it's called the vitamin D hammer and it is effective. What do you think of this? No, it isn't a hammer.
Well, okay, the first thing I always think, and what I encourage people to think of, is, are you going to do any harm? Because if you're going to do something and it helps, great. If you do something it doesn't help but it hurts, that's bad. If you do something and if it doesn't help but hurts, that's bad. So my first filter is this going to do you any harm if you do this? And I think the answer is no on that, although that's a really high dose. I mean, I've read literature that says way back when we were treating tuberculosis patients were given like 100,000 international units as an injection for a therapeutic dose, and that may have helped. I don't know. So I have a feeling there is some basis for what this provider is recommending. I don't think it's going to do any harm. I don't know how much it's going to help, to be totally honest. Other than ultimately what we want is you to have replete vitamin D levels. We want you to be in, I know some providers at National Jewish, for instance, sometimes they lean towards having a serum vitamin D level of 50.
Mhm.
And that's hard to achieve for some people.
Yeah.
So I think as long as you're not doing it long term and you're not going into any toxic level range, it may be okay. But again, I don't.
And definitely ask your doctor before you do that,
Yeah, agreed.
before you do it.
Yeah.
Somebody commented on chocolate. There are a lot of other good chocolate brands out there. They mentioned one called Cool, K''UL, up to 80% dark. It's organic, eco-friendly, sustainably sourced. Trader Joe's has Uganda chocolate as well as their dark chocolate lover bars, both 85% and dang good. And yes, Trader Joe's does have excellent dark chocolate. Eat your chocolate before 5 p.m. Yes, good tip. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm allergic to caffeine. Is there a chocolate that doesn't have caffeine? Probably white chocolate, right?
Probably white chocolate.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because all that does not have the cocoa in it.
Yeah.
Which protein powder is best if you have NTM? Is there one that's best, or is it like just you want a good quality one?
So I think what I want to say is just the one that you like the most. I know that I don't mean to be a cop out, but you should, there's a lot of formulations. Some people like some more than others. And the one that works with your food preferences and however you're preparing it, and the one that you like is probably the best. What else was I going to say on the protein side of things? Yeah, I don't know if I haven't looked to see if Consumer Lab has actually reviewed protein supplements, but my guess is they might have. So if you can find a third-party certifier or something that, that's always a good thing. But in general, you want one that fits with your dietary preferences and that you like and that you enjoy and can incorporate.
Somebody's saying, can you address alcohol, specifically like a small glass of red wine complementing a nutritious dinner? Does that have any kind of impact on the immune system, like maybe positive or negative?
So unfortunately, reflux is always like hovering over our heads, but alcohol is maybe the most potent trigger for reflux. So it sounds like you're trying to do it earlier with dinner, which is good. I mean, what we know about wine is that it does contain health promoting flavonols and ingredients. So I think there probably are benefits. I can't necessarily tie them right now directly to the immune system, but my guess is the anti-inflammatory effects or the antioxidant effects are probably beneficial. But keep in mind, it is a reflux trigger.
Okay. Does sauteing garlic lessen the effect on reflux?
So garlic is not a typical reflux trigger. It is for some people. Some people report that garlic and onions cause problems, but in general, I don't say it's off limits for reflux. So I'm okay with sauteed garlic.
How much protein should we have if we need 30% more than normal?
Right. So in general, let me get out my calculator, but you could do the calculation. Your protein needs are based on your kilogram body weight. So let's say you're 120 pounds, you're 55 kilograms. The RDA for protein is about 0.8 kilograms of protein per kilogram per day. So let's just round that up to 1 to make this easy in our minds. So 1 gram of protein per kilogram per day, that's 55 grams. If you want 30% more, then you multiply that by 1.3 or 30% more. So take 55 grams of protein per kilogram per day times 1.3, and we're at 72 grams. So that's a good ballpark. And honestly, when I calculate protein needs, this is for women. for women primarily, usually they fall in that range at 60 to 90 grams or more, especially if you're underweight per day. That's
Okay.
relatively, it sounds high, but it's
If you need more, then
eminently doable. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, a 6-ounce piece of salmon is going to have 40 grams of protein in it. So you can get your protein and your omega-3s.
So we have a couple of comments. Shockley Vivix has the equivalent of 300 glasses of wine per serving, a teaspoon per day. I assume they're talking about antioxidants. So that's something to look into. I wrote the name down, and then somebody else says Orgain is organic and has formulas for both vegans and regular people. So that those are two things that we could look into.
Yeah, Orgain and Kate Farms are the common
Yes.
Plant-based protein powders, and I don't know that Kate Farms has protein powders, but they have protein shakes.
Okay. What do you think of sodium alginate therapy for GERD? There is a product called Reflux Gourmet. It makes a raft in the stomach to help prevent reflux.
Makes a raft in the stomach?
Yeah, I guess it, like when it goes in there, it foams a little bit or something. I don't know.
And it's a sodium
Called
alginate?
sodium alginate. Have you heard of this or?
I haven't.
Okay. Probably more of a question for Gwen Hewitt.
Yeah, and I'm just going to toss in a couple of 2 cents there. I don't know. The answer is I don't know, but sodium alginate, I think, I'm relating it to sodium bicarbonate. Maybe that's not fair, but if it's an alkalinizing, so what I see anti-reflux products that are alkalinizing, but that's not necessarily, that may be suppressing acid, but it may not be suppressing the movement of fluid up. So even if it's creating a raft, I have a hard time believing that you don't have movement in the stomach. So yeah. I'm going to say it's probably not what we're looking for to promote or to minimize reflux events. Right. It might be suppressing acidity.
Okay. Somebody is asking about how you brew your coffee and tea. Is cold brew or sun tea better than regular brewed? And I guess
depends on the caffeine content, I suppose. I think they're both going to contain caffeine.
Yeah.
So I just don't know I don't know how different.
I mean, I don't, you know, I to be honest, when I sun brew my iced tea, it ends up just as dark as my regular tea. So right. I'm not sure how that. Right. Last question: does dark chocolate raise glucose levels?
If there's sugar in it, it does.
Yeah, and it'll depend on the sugar content.
Yeah.
As to how much it spikes it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have come to the end of the questions. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with it. And thank you, Michelle, for sticking with that. We had a lot of questions and we were able to get through them all, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar. We will be sending out announcements shortly about our upcoming webinars. We have some additional ones coming up that are scheduled. And we really appreciate everybody coming out. Michelle, thank you so much for helping us kick off our new year and new webinar series. We look forward to having you back in a couple months with another terrific webinar in our nutrition series. Everybody have a wonderful week. Everybody stay safe. If wherever you are, stay warm. If you're in Florida, you should know it's going to get colder. Look out for falling lizards. And everybody have a great and safe week. Have a good one, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.